Welcome everyone to an overview of Spectre 4 Aeternus Dark. This is the latest generation of Spectre, which was introduced with Spectre 4 Carbon, which is a similar case just with different aesthetics. So Spectre 4 Carbon has fully transparent distribution plates and carbon fiber outer panels, whereas Spectre 4 Aeternus Dark has grey tinted distribution plates, or at least the inner layer is grey tinted, the outer layers are transparent, and it has satin black outer panels. So first of all, what is included with the case? Because on this build, some of the parts of the case that you are seeing are add-ons which can be added separately. So you get the main rear distribution plate with the integrated D5 reservoir combo and parts of the loop, the Powerboard, the front distribution plate. You just get the standard top panel. No distribution plate up there, but as an add-on you can add a distribution plate which is the same as the front one, and this would just be an aesthetic add-on. It doesn't add anything to the function of the case. You also get the PSU side shroud screen. The distribution plate that you're seeing on this side, so this one here, is not included with the case. It is a separate add-on. And this adds a second D5 reservoir combo and parts of the loop. And this is specifically for adding a second loop if you're going to run dual loops, one for the CPU and one for the GPU. But it is also for aesthetics, you know, if you want to add more distribution plates, or if you want to add a second D5, although there are other ways of adding a second D5. Another add-on which is on this case, which is not included, is the Fan Guardian Powerboard controller. So this is different from the PSU side shroud screen because this is just a display, and something like AIDA64 needs to be used to set up this display for monitoring system stats, whereas this is actually a controller for controlling the Powerboard. So you can control the lighting from here. It's a touch screen, and you can also monitor all of the RPMs and temperatures, you know, the vitals for a water-cooled system. All these cases that I've mentioned, Spectre 4 Carbon, Aeternus, are limited editions, and the reason we're doing the things this way with Spectre is because we move forward so quickly with development that we like to introduce some of our new technology, what we've been working on, along the way. And the best way we can do this is with short runs and limited editions. And also some of the limited editions are quite difficult to produce and just cannot be done in high volume, so they have to be limited. So first of all, to go over the changes to the distribution plates, we have a new front/top distribution plate which has the entire center cut out of it for improved airflow and different aesthetics. As well as having the center cut out, it also brings in air all the way around the perimeter, so this allows for plenty of airflow and improved airflow compared to all previous designs. There's also a dust filter there. The dual loop side panel has also been significantly changed. The window is now much larger, so you can see more of the components inside of the build. It is also easier to work on through the dual loop side panel. You know, so what I do when I'm building the system, I install everything that I can without the dual loop side panel. So the core components, the radiators, fans, do most of the cables and everything. Then I install the dual loop side panel, and you know, then just the last few tubes get connected up, and that way you can get easier access without the dual loop side panel installed. But with this larger window, it is easier actually to build the entire system through that window if you wanted to, but I'm still adding the dual loop side panel later anyway, so this was more of an aesthetic update. We also have less covers on the dual loop side panel to make it more transparent. So even though this is the dark version and the inner layer is grey tinted, you can still easily see through to the internal components. So just a few small changes. The layout has also changed. We have moved this port down just for better alignment to the GPU. We've added an extra port down here for a temperature sensor, so you can see this one just here. And another change is that we've added this Fan Guardian mount onto the dual loop side panel, so this is something that we didn't have before. And this allows you to access and see the Fan Guardian from the outside. Instead of the Fan Guardian being mounted up here on the reservoir, which was really the only option that you had before. The main distribution plate of the case has a complete redesign, but in terms of function, nothing has changed. It is just an aesthetic update. But when it comes to the Powerboard, it has been completely updated. This is a completely new Powerboard design, and this also changes the main distribution plate of the case because the Powerboard is a different shape. It mounts in a different way. Instead of mounting from the inside, it actually mounts from the outside at the back. So the Powerboard can be removed without draining the loop, without removing the motherboard, and it can also be accessed from the back, all of the connections on the Powerboard and the controls. So this makes it a bit easier to work on and to maintain. For example, all of the connections from the power supply to the Powerboard are across the bottom here, and we'll take a look at those shortly when I remove these covers. In this case, I haven't yet installed the limited edition badge, which will go there. So that says Spectre 4A Aeternus Dark and has the limited edition case number. So this idea of having the Powerboard mounting from the outside was actually how we first introduced the very first Powerboard, which was on Spectre 3. And this was over 5 years ago now, the first Powerboard. And Spectre 3 wasn't actually designed for the Powerboard. It was designed pre-Powerboard with cable channels. So we were the first to introduce like cable routing channels with cable combs, and then a lot of other people started doing this later, but by that time we'd already introduced the Powerboard. And for Spectre 3, the Powerboard mounted from the back on the outside, so it was easy access from the back. And so for the first time, we kind of wanted to go back to that and have a rear-mounted Powerboard. I've actually only just finished building this system, so I haven't even given it a clean yet. It's always really important to give your system a good clean after you finish building it, because it'll be covered in finger marks and a bit of dust and debris. So this was like just the first boot. Now I'll shut it down, give it a good clean, and then begin testing. But you can see what it looks like with all of the covers removed. You can see the entire Powerboard. You can access everything from the back. So a couple of the covers are satin black, the one for the fan here, and then the drive mounting area. And then the other two covers, which go down this side here, are PCB covers with integrated LEDs. And these have our daisy chain, which we now have on most of our cases, certainly all Spectres. And I guess most importantly here, with the new Powerboard, you can see all of the input connections across the bottom. And this is for easy access. It can all be accessed from the back. There's another cover down here. If you remove this, you can get even more access into the power supply. So there's a lot of easy ways to work on the case. And this is a small detail that some people miss that can make it really difficult. Like, let's say you finish the build and an ARGB cable comes unplugged inside of the PSU shroud. So how do you get in there? And a lot of people are trying to work through little gaps and try to reconnect things, but even on previous cases without the rear Powerboard access, you can actually just tip the case over, remove the entire bottom panel, and go in through the bottom to work on it. Even with the dual loop side panel installed, you can take the screen out and go in through that side to work on it. But with this new rear mounted Powerboard, it's even easier because you can just work on everything from the back here. You can even go in and connect and disconnect things from the power supply. So across the bottom here, we have the 24-pin, 3 8-pin PCIe, 2 12VH power, the power and reset buttons, the temperature sensors for the integrated PWM control. So we have 4-channel individual RPM control built into the Powerboard with adjustable RPM curves. We have a SATA data input there for the integrated direct drive mount, which can be 1 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch. And then we have 2 8-pin EPS. Interesting fact about all of the Powerboards is that the 12-volt and ground are shared. So let's say you have a power supply that doesn't have 12VH power. Well, then you can just plug in the 3 8-pin PCIe instead of the 12VH power. So you can see what we've done for this system. We have a 5090, so we have the 12VH power plugged in, but for extra support for the 12VH power, I've also plugged in 1 8-pin PCIe cable. And then of course we have the usual 24-pin and the 2 8-pin EPS. You can even plug in an extra 2 8-pin PCIe and another 12 VH power, and this gives you a lot more input power, which is accessible for the Powerboard. So, you know, what I have here is more than enough, because even the 12 VH power on its own is enough according to NVIDIA. But then we have an extra 8-pin PCIe as well for some extra support. So this seems to have helped us with the 12 VH power cable. So the Powerboard can act as an adapter so that you don't need adapters. I'm actually going to make another video soon, which is like a full Powerboard overview, going over like just the basics, because a lot of people ask, you know, how does it work with the inputs and outputs? Are they all separated? Which is what most people think. So most people think, like, if you plug a 12 VH power cable into 12 VH power connector 1, then you have to use 12 VH power connector 1 on the other side, but that's not actually the case. It's all shared for, you know, maximum input power to the Powerboard. So then all you need to do is just make sure that you have more, or at least equal input power to what you're pulling from the Powerboard. So yeah, we have the rear mounted fan, which connects back here, also on the back, you know, so you're not having to do connections around the front where things are tight. And then we have the temperature-based RPM control. So all of this works from the 2 temperature sensor inputs, which need to go to into the coolant. So you need to have temperature sensors in the coolant, and there's 2 for loop 1 and loop 2. And then you have pots which adjust the starting point of the RPM curve. The RPM curve ranges are 50 to 100% for the pumps and 30 to 100% for the fans, from 25 to 50 degrees Celsius for the cooler temperature. So if you turn the pot all the way down, the RPM curve will start at the minimum. And then if you turn it all the way up, it'll just be at maximum RPM. And then we have a lot of switches so that you can change which temperature sensor each PWM channel is being controlled by, you know, so that you don't have to switch cables around. You can just switch a switch, and you can also change it from motherboard control to Powerboard control. So that's what the T and MB are. So if you want to control the RPMs via the motherboard the traditional way, by setting up RPM curves in the BIOS, you switch all of these switches to MB, and then you need to have a cable running from the motherboard PWM outputs. And because there's 4 PWM channels, you know, if you're using all of the channels, then you need to have outputs from, you know, at least 4 outputs on the motherboard going to PWM inputs on the Powerboard. So this is just so that the motherboard can communicate the PWM control to the Powerboard. So the inputs need to be connected if you're going to do that. If you're going to run Powerboard control, you don't need to have any inputs going from the motherboard, unless you want to read RPM signals via the motherboard. So Powerboard control, you can then control the RPMs and the curves via the Powerboard's inbuilt temperature-based RPM control. Also something similar for the ARGB. We have ARGB source here. You can switch to motherboard control, and then all of the ARGB LEDs, the integrated LEDs that you can see here, and all of the ARGB connections on the Powerboard can be controlled via the motherboard. But for this, again, you need to have signal coming from the motherboard to the Powerboard, and for that you need to have an ARGB cable going from an output on the motherboard to the Powerboard's ARGB input. Otherwise, if you want to use Powerboard control, you need to have a fan guardian, and you know, the fan guardian then takes over the control of the ARGB from the motherboard. Just to go over the specifications for the build, as I've mentioned, we have the Spectre 4 Aeternus Dark limited edition water cooling case. It has the following add-ons: the dual loop side panel, the fan guardian, and the fan guardian mount for the dual loop side panel. We have the 9950X3D 64 gig of G.Skill. We have the 9100 Pro 4TB X870E Hero, Asus Astral 5090 with our water block for it, and this is the acrylic with black satin version. We have SingularityComputers fittings, tube and coolant, Alpha Cool radiators, Fantex M25 non-RGB fans, 2 D5s and 2 separate loops, one for the CPU and one for the GPU, And we also have a Seasonic 1600 watt power supply.